I've had a lot of people ask me to do a story on Killing Joke. Now, whenever I do a story on a band for the very first time, especially if they have a long career, I always ask myself, where do I start? Well, in today's video, we're going to talk about the album that saw most of the band's classic lineup reassemble and return with what was one of their best albums in years. They recorded part of the album in one of the most mysterious places in the world. It was chock full of bribery, levitation, and exorcisms. Let me know in the comment section what other albums or eras of Killing Joke you want me to cover. Before we get started, be sure to hit the bell notification icon and put all notifications on. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't even get notifications when I post my videos. I would greatly appreciate if you guys did that. In addition to, of course, watching my videos and sharing my content. Hailing from Notting Hill, London, Killing Joke carved out their own lane in the late 70s and early 80s, fusing the raw energy of punk with a heavy dose of industrial menace and a touch of dub, along with music that was steeped in mysticism. The band's original lineup featured the enigmatic frontman Jazz Coleman, Geordie Walker on guitar, Youth, also known as Martin Glover on bass, and Paul Ferguson behind the kit. From the get-go, Killing Joke weren't interested into fitting into one box. Their 1980s self-titled debut wasn't just another post-punk record, it was a warning shot, packed with tribal rhythms and apocalyptic lyrics that made you feel like the world could really end at any second. Killing Joke has long stood out as one of the most distinctive and mysterious bands in rock, forging their own path far from conventional norms and leaving a profound mark on the music world. Their history has been defined by constant lineup changes, as well as a restless and wandering spirit, as well as a commitment to exploring diverse interests outside of the band as well. Despite these challenges, any one of which could have ended a lesser-known group, Killing Joke has thrived on the fringes of the mainstream, building a devoted cult following and exerting a lasting influence on artists across different genres, including groups like Metallica, Helmet, Ministry, and Nine Inch Nails. As the 80s progressed, Killing Joke didn't just stick to one formula, they kept pushing their boundaries. Albums like What's This For and Revelations saw the band diving deeper into uncharted sonic territory. By the middle of the decade, they started experimenting with a more approachable sound, which paid off with the massive success of the song Love Like Blood from 1985's Nighttime. Despite their brush with mainstream popularity, Jazz Coleman's lyrics remained as apocalyptic as ever, and Geordie Walker's guitar work stayed instantly recognizable. But success came with its own set of problems. The band cycled through lineup changes and things just simply got weird. Coleman and Walker retreated to Iceland in the early 80s to escape what Coleman thought was the impending nuclear Armageddon. Fast forward to the 90s and the band found themselves at a crossroads. Alternative rock and grunge was taking over, and a lot of their peers were either calling it quits or softening their sound. Not Killing Joke though. Instead, they doubled down on what made them unique. Coleman told the record newspaper, intellectually and creatively, we're all very similar people, and that can lead to enormous tension. Bassist Youth found that tension to be too much, and he left the band in 1982, going into production work for pop and dance artists, and he became a highly sought-after producer. Coleman, meanwhile, also branched out of the band, getting into classical music, working with the Cairo and New Zealand symphonies. In addition to studying Arabic violin at Cairo's University, Coleman told a record newspaper, having different musical outlets expands our souls in different ways, and having freedom as individuals has helped the band tremendously. Geordie, meanwhile, split his time between Detroit and Italy. However, the guitarist wasn't impressed with some bands taking influence from Killing Joke, citing Dinosaur Jr.'s song Feel the Pain, claiming that leader Jay Mascis had only changed the last note on the song. Youth, however, offered a different take, adding, it's a great validation of our work. You're trying to move people, and if you move them to the point where they'd rip you off, you're doing something right. Youth ended up rejoining Killing Joke in 1992 when the bassist was working with Geordie on a Killing Joke anthology. Youth was the one who actually brought up the prospect of rejoining the group. Aside from their drummer being replaced by Jeff Dugmore, this was the original lineup, and it was kind of a big deal, although they had their own share of issues as well. Youth remarked to The Guardian about reforming in the early 90s, it seemed like a bit of a risky decision, not just to rejoin the band I'd left a decade before, but to sign them to my label Butterfly and produce them too. Youth added, "It certainly didn't go smoothly. We're all alpha male types who want our own way, and one discussion ended with Jaz Coleman hurling a whiskey bottle at my head." What came next for the band was their 1994 album Pandemonium. The record didn't just mark a return, it was a full-blown resurrection. The album fused their signature industrial assault with Middle Eastern influences, all while sounding heavier and more urgent than ever. Some of the vocal tracks were recorded inside the Great Pyramids of Giza because, of course it was. Coleman was so enamored and focused on making music that he went to some pretty big extremes in the recording of the album. He remarked how he severed all ties with his family prior to the recording process, admitting, "The domestic life would have held me back. I'm either scoring or conducting or I'm with Killing Joke. It's 7 days a week and I had to clean out everything else in my life to only have those two aspects." Recording was split between Coleman's studio in New Zealand, Youth's studio in England, and at the time, the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt. Coleman remarked in one interview how he believed the pyramids were constructed by a non-human intelligence. But recording in the North African country presented its own set of challenges. It was Coleman's idea to actually record in Egypt, having worked there previously. But at the same time, being familiar with how things worked in the country, he knew it was going to be a difficult undertaking, and even admitted that he thought that recording in the pyramids would likely just end up being a pipe dream. Killing Joke wanted to record in Egypt for a few reasons. Youth remarked how it was all about the Earth's energy and the fact that the pyramids were positioned on the 32nd or 33rd degree latitude, which is tied to the Earth's energy ley lines, adding, "The St. Michael ley line, for example, that runs through Glastonbury continues on through the pyramid. I was attracted by the esoteric occult significance of the Great Pyramid. Being a pyramid, it has interesting properties, its proportions, and when it was first built, it was all covered with marble. It was through a friend of theirs, an Egyptologist named Mary Lamondo, that she arranged accommodations with a woman who was also an Egyptologist, who also happened to be running a yoga retreat near the Sphinx." Coleman remarked, "Khadija was a very sexy Texan lady, an ex-Pan Am stewardess who had converted to Islam. I couldn't imagine how she could be an Egyptologist. In Egypt, you don't wear skin-tight jeans and cowboy boots and have your privates hanging out." Then we went to cite with her. All these Arab guys came swarming towards her. He added that she knew how to handle herself and soon sent the Arab men fleeing. But Killing Joke weren't the first people to record in the pyramids, as apparently producer, mixer, and engineer Bob Clearmountain had previously done it. At least that's what one source claimed. The Egyptian government allowed people to pay for private time inside the pyramids. There were basically two rates. There was a lower rate for private use, like meditation, and then a higher rate for commercial uses. Thanks to Lamondo, she had contacts inside the Egyptian government and set up a meeting between the band and the Minister for Antiques. Killing Joke's members lied about what they were going to be doing in the pyramids, telling the minister they were of course going to be using it for meditation purposes, and they got the lower rate. The rate they ended up paying to the minister was actually a bribe in the amount of $3,000 in US cash. This bribe gave the band 3 days of recording time, and Coleman soon recruited local musicians to add an authentic flavor to their songs. The band was forced to haul in a huge supply of batteries inside the pyramids since there were no outlets available, of course. They soon realized, though, that the pyramids seemed to sap the battery's energy, cutting what should have been 7 hours of power down to just 10 minutes. Youth recalled at one point that Coleman became so overwhelmed that he collapsed in tears on the floor when the sessions weren't going his way. The bassist initially thought the reaction might have been due to the brandy the frontman was drinking and just the overall intensity of the experience. To help Coleman recover, they decided to pause the session and return to the hotel early. Later, while reflecting on the situation, Youth realized the symbolic importance of the number 3 in the context of the pyramids. Inspired by this, they decided that only 3 people, including Youth, Jaz, and 1 engineer, in addition to 3 women, should be present in the chamber, with everyone else remaining in the Queen's chamber during the recording. The band concocted the idea of treating the recording really like a ceremony. Youth described leading the ceremony while wearing almost nothing except a thin lungi around his waist, moving around with burning sage bushes in his hands. He had brought in an abundance of flowers, garlands, incense, holy water, and some naturally wand-shaped quartz crystals, which he believed can break through negative energies. He used these crystals to cast a protective circle, and he felt like that also had a significant impact on the ceremony and also helped with the battery issue. It was during the ceremony, 3 of the female Egyptologists came into the session wearing traditional Egyptian ceremonial costumes, taking the members and the producer by surprise. Engineer co-producer Greg Hunter told Loudersound, "Jaz stood behind the sarcophagus and Youth and I pointed the quartz wands at Jaz while he was singing, and we kind of screamed at Jaz, and he screamed back. It was during these sessions their engineer Sam was falling asleep, then he woke up and suddenly ran out screaming." He recalled to Loudersound, "These eyes, shiny eyes, come to my dreams many times. From this day, I never go to the pyramids." Youth added, "At one moment, it looked as if Jaz was actually levitating, suspended in the air inside the chamber. The atmosphere was incredible, the acoustics were stunning, and the recording itself was extraordinary. When the band headed outside, they found a lively gathering of hundreds of Bedouins who were burning fires, who were singing and dancing in celebration. The session was actually filmed by director Sean Pettigrew and featured in the Killing Joke documentary The Death and Resurrection Show, which also detailed the alleged paranormal experiences in the pyramids." The 3 songs that were recorded in Egypt included the vocal tracks for the title track, the 7.5-minute Exorcism, and Millennium. The title track and Black Moon and Mathematics of Chaos deal with humanity's fate and the constant struggle of good versus evil. Coleman remarked, "Humanity is faced with the most profound choices. Do we destroy the planet or find new ways? We're seeing great enlightenment with terrible atrocities. This is the time of the Great Awakening." Elsewhere, the album tackles AIDS, cruelty, and poverty. Millennium and the title track peaked at number 34 and 28 on the UK singles charts, while the single Jana peaked at number 54. Youth reflected on the band's transformation up until this point, recalling how Killing Joke started as punks, but punk was never about making things simplistic or superficial. He openly embraced his appreciation for genres like disco and artists such as Pink Floyd, and the band incorporated those influences alongside dub reggae. By the time the band worked on Pandemonium, Youth had further developed his production skills, and the band aimed to blend all those styles and more, including classic rock and industrial elements. Youth believed that the combination of their dramatic history and creative conflicts was channeled effectively, resulting in their most commercially successful album to date. The widespread recognition that eluded the group for so long seemed to finally be pointing in the band's direction. Pandemonium was getting the band play on college, alternative, and metal radio stations, with them playing some of the biggest shows of their career. Coleman told the record, "It seems like a good atmosphere for us at the moment. We're enjoying the biggest audiences and sales of our career." That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Story sticker.